Yeah, I'm the tax man. Should 5% appear too small? Be thankful I don't take it all. 'Cause I'm the tax man. Yeah, I'm the tax man.
Oh, reverse. Welcome to Tax Watch. This is the monthly program brought to you by the concerned taxpayers of Duval County regarding local issues of interest to taxpayers, primarily in Duval County, but throughout Northeast Florida. With me today, I have one of our board members, Curt Lee, who is the de facto public pension guy here at the concerned taxpayers. And I also have with us a former candidate for Senate District Seat 1, Ramon.
Pleasure to be here.
Speaking to you now, the election was just yesterday, and we're going to do a little bit of a postmortem about that and talk about some of the proposals that have been made to actually do away with special elections here in Florida and replace them with another system. But first off, if you're watching this show before the end of September, in all likelihood, the Jacksonville City Council has not yet adopted a budget. They plan to do that on September 27th. One of the things that we wanted to note here from the concerned taxpayers' point of view is that this is a process that in the past, under the Payton administration, became extremely contentious. Involved raising the tax rate, if not the overall amount of revenue that the city was generating based on the property tax. And this year, amazingly enough, we have a new mayor who pledged as part of his campaign that he would not raise the tax rate. We did not raise the tax rate, at least at this point. We anticipate that the Jacksonville City Council will adopt a budget that retains the rate from last year, even though that means that the city will have tens of millions less to work with in the upcoming year. One of the few things I think that we might see any kind of real discussion about will be the library budget as it's presently constituted. The proposed budget would shut down all of the libraries at least one day a week. And there's a real question about whatever cuts we make to the public safety budget, to the sheriff's budget, whether or not the police union is going to ultimately play ball. At this point, Nelson Cuba, who is the president of the Fraternal Order of Police, is busy filing labor grievances against the sheriff, the city council, and perhaps anyone who volunteers any criticism whatsoever of Mr. Cuba. One thing I wanted to mention, I have, at the end of this show, I'll have a special announcement about things that we've done in the past that have come back to haunt us again and again. But I did want to start by asking Curt Lee. We have a pending bill that's 2011-400 that involves public pensions. And what is the status of this bill? I know we certainly want it to go away for the present.
Well, we do indeed. The status is that in the waning days of the Payton administration, it was suddenly presented and then suddenly voted on, bypassing the committee process. They used a process called the Committee of the Whole. Between the presentation and the vote by the Committee of the Whole, I think there were a total of 3 or 4 days. Nobody had any meaningful chance to offer any input. And the irony is that it's a 19-year deal that would cost taxpayers over $1 billion, which in Duval County is an awful lot of money. And it was rushed through after 2 years of secret negotiations. So that is that's where it started. A lot of people subsequently complained about it, including those of us at Concerned Taxpayers. And as of now, Mayor Brown has requested a delay in a vote on it until October 25th. We do not know what the mayor will do. Maybe he'll withdraw it, maybe he'll decide he likes it, or maybe he is right now trying to get some changes to it, but it is a bad bill.
Well, if you could enlighten the viewers a little bit as to exactly what it is you feel makes it a bad bill and what a good bill would consist of.
Okay, well, that's a tall order. I'll try to be brief. It's a bad bill for procedural and substantive reasons. I already dealt with a little bit about the procedure, the rush, the fact that it was not publicly discussed along the way, that it was not publicly negotiated. The substance of why it's a bad bill is that it's far too costly and it's a lost opportunity. The Police and Fire Pension Fund and the plan entails a very lavish set of retirement benefits for policemen and firemen. They can retire in their 40s at 80% salary replacement, and when they do so, after they do so, they get 3% cost of living adjustments. So the average policeman and fireman in Jacksonville gets a pension benefit of about $50,000 a year, which is way out of whack compared to the private sector and even compared to government. So you start out with these lavish benefits, and the bill hardly touches those lavish benefits. What we need, instead of tinkering around the edges, is a comprehensive and fundamental rethinking of public pensions. Let's move them towards the way the private sector has pensions, which is basically they offer 401k plans. Or plans similar to 401k plans. Government can do the same. We shouldn't be having people retire in their 40s at $50,000 a year and then give them 3% increases. It's unaffordable. There's a $1.7 billion public pension deficit right now in Jacksonville. Jacksonville's in a fiscal crisis in large part because of public pensions. And 2011-400 is a drop in the bucket. It really won't change the current crisis.
So there's no baby in this bill that you're tossing out with the bathwater. I mean, this is,
there's very little that's any good in this bill. They basically need to start over and negotiate much more vigorously. And
hopefully transparently.
Transparently as well, yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for that update on that bill. Time permitting, I'll get back to you later in the show to talk about the lawsuit that Concerned Taxpayers joined with you in regarding the same issue. Raymond Day, welcome back to the real world.
Thank you very much. It's good to be back in the real world.
How is your month or two in the Whirlwind campaign?
Well,
what's it left you thinking?
It was a fascinating experience. You know, I started the process on August the 8th when I issued a news release, and then later that evening spoke before the board of directors of the Concerned Taxpayers of Duval County. When I announced my candidacy, I qualified August the 18th. I was the first person to qualify in the Senate race, and it was a very gratifying experience in terms of having the opportunity to meet so many people throughout the district from Duval County to Volusia. And restores my confidence in our democratic system of government, even though I was not the nominee of the Democratic Party after the results were tallied last night. It's refreshing to see the commitment that candidates bring to public service, an opportunity to discuss the issues before different groups, before the newspaper editorial board, and a chance to meet with groups such as your own.
Well, I know that you've already called Audrey Gibson and congratulated her on her selection to be the Democratic nominee. Which,
I did.
Which I believe is tantamount to being election as the senator in this particular seat.
It will in this case because it was a Democratic primary. It was a closed primary. And the nominee, who Audrey Gibson, was selected last night by the voters, overwhelmingly by over 60%, now faces a write-in candidate, which technically has triggered a general election. If the write-in candidate were to drop out of the race, as I would encourage the write-in candidate to do, given Audrey's overwhelming preponderance of support in the election on Tuesday, September 20th, then that will spare the state of Florida from having to reimburse the counties $500,000. So I think that, in the interest of public economy, I would encourage the write-in candidate to withdraw.
Well, now that brings up an issue which I think genuinely concerns us as the concerned taxpayers. Certainly has been mentioned by Jerry Holland, who's our supervisor of elections here in Duval County, which is that while you're talking about potential savings from not having a general election in this particular race, we've already spent $500,000 having this primary. There's a proposal that Jerry Holland and other supervisors have made to replace the special elections with a political selection process, allow the executive committees of the party that the resigning member belongs to select the successor without the interference of the voters in the process. Now, granted, you just came from an election with a remarkably low turnout. The supervisor of elections in St. Johns County estimated that each vote in that county has cost the taxpayers of Florida $273 in order to obtain that vote. Given that, what's your position on whether or not we should continue to have special elections in Florida?
Well, I don't think you can put a price on democracy. We have, a 200-year history, in excess of 200-year history of people fighting a revolution, fighting a civil war, and the women's movement for the ultimate extension of the right to vote. And I think to eliminate that right to vote would be a tremendous mistake, and I think a severe blow to our traditions of democratic government. I would have no problem with the political parties, the two major political parties, selecting a nominee through their executive committee process, as was done with Representative Davis in a special election when Lieutenant Governor Carroll resigned from her House seat. The parties could then select a nominee, and then those two nominees would go to the voters in a general election. And you could also have a petition route to enable a non-party affiliate or an independent party candidate or other party candidates who would like to go through a petition process of getting on the ballot. And then we would only have to have one general election. I'd have no problem with that in principle, but I don't want to simply confer election upon an individual of one party because that party was the designated party of the incumbent who resigned.
All right, and I obviously the concerned taxpayers have not taken any kind of official position about this. In fact, this is 24-hour-old news, and we may very well, though, in the future. We had been a supporter, and I believe we continue to support the idea of moving our municipal elections in Duval County to the fall. But we were not in favor of what Supervisor Holland suggested would save money at the time, which would be to attach it to the general election cycle. We personally believe that elections especially local elections, do not get any of the attention that they deserve when they're subsumed in the general election cycle. So we agree with you, Mr. Day, that the mere idea of attempting to save some money at the expense of the democratic process is not a good idea.
Yep.
Let me bring up something. We are in the process of trying to reorganize the program to actually incorporate a segment of issues that are of ongoing concern, physical issues, things like the lawsuit that we have with the over the public pensions, the other lawsuit that we have over the Trail Ridge vote that extended the contract for waste management for decades. And interestingly enough, one of the major players in that process, Alan Mosley, who was former Mayor Payton's chief administrative officer back during the time that the waste management debacle was taking place, had moved on last January to become the head of the regional Florida Department of Transportation. Now, he was more recently in the news when he came over here with up to Duval County with Jennifer Carroll, the lieutenant governor, and announced that an existing road was in the process of being considered to turn into a toll road on the west side of Jacksonville. That fell very flat politically, since we in the past had legislation to get rid of tolls in Jacksonville when we had toll bridges and toll roads. So now Mr. Mosley, and I want to congratulate him on his decision to resign immediately in order to seek employment in the private sector rather than waiting until he has a job before he resigns. But he has resigned from his position as the head of the Florida Department of Transportation, and I think that the concerned taxpayers of Duval County need to remind everyone that Mr. Mosley was instrumental in all of the budgets of the Payton office up until the time of his resignation. He was instrumental in the Better Jacksonville plan and the building of the new courthouse, which we will also remind you is a project that grew from $190 million to its present $350 million, while Mr. Mosley was acting either as Public Works Director or as the Chief Administrative Officer of the city. And that during the first round of the waste management debacle, when the City Council initially rejected the mayor's plan, that Mr. Mosley had gone out and solicited an affidavit from the former City Works Director, which that person then later said had been obtained under what amounted to being false pretenses. So congratulations to Mr. Mosley on his pursuit of future endeavors. And with that, I will get back to you, Mr. Curtis Lee, for an update on the lawsuit that we have pending regarding these pension matters.
All right, well, thank you very much. One preface to the lawsuit is to remind everybody of the importance of public pensions in Jacksonville. Approximately 14% of the general fund budget goes to public employee pensions in Jacksonville. It works out to over $140 million a year if you include the JEA portion of the pension costs, because there are pension costs that you don't even see as a resident of Jacksonville. And at any rate, that's $150 per person per year, about $450 per three-person household on average. So it's a very costly thing that the taxpayers of Jacksonville do. All right, now on to updating the lawsuit. We, myself and the concerned taxpayers as a group, had filed a lawsuit in June against the city and the Police and Fire Pension Fund alleging that the pre-existing agreements between the city and the Police and Fire Pension Fund were unlawful and should be declared void. And the two main reasons for the lawsuit were that there's a 3-year rule under Florida law that says that collective bargaining agreements cannot exceed 3 years in duration, whereas these older agreements concerning pensions had a 30-year term. So that was issue number one. Another issue was that the agreements and arrangements in the past had been negotiated without public notice. In other words, not in the sunshine, as we call it, not subject to the sunshine law. And the sunshine law says that when you collectively bargain employee benefits, including pension benefits, you have to do so at a public meeting. At least you have to give the public the opportunity to attend. Okay, so there were these violations and the lawsuit was commenced. The lawsuit was assigned to a judge in Circuit Court, Duval County, by the name of Judge Daniel. The city and the Police and Fire Pension Fund made motions to dismiss. The judge said, in essence, that the lawsuit was a bit confusing and should be refiled. So we ended up refiling the lawsuit in August. And so it is still pending. The city and the Police and Fire Pension Fund are trying to dismiss it again for pretty much the same reasons and with a little bit of a new twist. Those motions have just been filed. There probably won't be a hearing on it for another month or two because the legal process is not exactly quick. But at any rate, it's sort of part and parcel of the cities and the Police and Fire Pension Fund's long-standing practice of wasting tens of thousands of dollars through the legal system to try to get out of the fact that they violated the law for several years.
There's a little follow-up to that. In your earlier suit, which did not involve the concerned taxpayers, which was over, I believe, a public documents request that you had?
Yes, yes.
Ultimately, how much did the fund pay its attorneys? I know it did not use general counsel's office.
No, the Police and Fire Pension Fund has for decades insisted on having its own attorneys because it wants to have control over everything. Even though the city pays for almost every penny that goes into the Police and Fire Pension Fund, the city doesn't control the expenditure of the money. So the pension fund, the Police and Fire Pension Fund, spent approximately $200,000 trying to oppose my lawsuit, wherein I alleged that they had violated the Sunshine Law. And incidentally, the judge decided that the Police and Fire Pension Fund had violated the Sunshine Law in two respects. So they spent about $200,000 and they lost.
All right, and I assume that the fees that you incurred were far, far less than $200,000?
I recently filed a motion to recover approximately $36,000 in fees and costs.
All right, so there's at least a 5-to-1 ratio
yes,
in efficiency.
Or a 6-to-1, probably by now. I'm not quite up to date on their fees. I'm sure it's over $200,000 today. And the Police and Fire Pension Fund has filed a notice of appeal, so it will grind on and on and on, and it'll probably be over $250,000 of waste by the time we're done.
And essentially, and this is another important issue to the concerned taxpayers. We have laws in Florida. Florida, in the past, has had what's considered one of the more liberal public records laws in the nation, although it's constantly under attack by state government and local governments that attempt to restrict access to public information rather than comply with the spirit of the law, which is for relatively full disclosure. Certainly of anything that wouldn't be considered to be very private information. The Sunshine Law applies to public meetings and transparency of that sort of government, but public records requests are something that any citizen can make. And I wanted to mention that there is the First Amendment Foundation is having a seminar on that. It has one here in Jacksonville just about every year. On September 30th at the Times Union Building. There is a nominal cost to it. I would suggest that you can check the League of Women Voters website to see what that cost is. It begins at approximately 8:30 in the morning and runs until about 2:30 in the afternoon. And any citizen would benefit enormously from attending that seminar if you're interested in going out and finding out on your own, as I encourage you all to do, just what government is up to. Now we're winding down the program now, so I want to go back to Raymond Day for a few last comments about both his experience in running and what the future is going to hold for you.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone who voted for me and who supported me in my campaign. I'm deeply grateful. We will look at the results. We knew I was in an uphill battle given the composition of the district. It's a very large district geographically. And I ran as a solid, moderate Democrat. I have a very proud political heritage, and I don't shrink from that heritage. We'll look at the results and evaluate what future political pursuits I may take. So.
All right, and I do want to say to the folks in Senate District 1 that it is disappointing that so few of you, in fact, voted. I believe in Flagler County, out of almost 1,800 eligible voters, only 41 bothered to vote, and that includes both absentee ballots and early voting, as well as yesterday's, from our perspective, yesterday's actual polling. And Curt Lee, any last remarks before we submit this to the world for another month?
Well, I guess I would urge people to contact the City Council over the next few weeks to ask them to take a serious and comprehensive approach to cutting public employee pension costs and solving the problem. It's hard, you know, those of us who are paying attention to it, we throw in our 2 cents, but it really helps to have a lot of people interested in the problem because it's $140 million a year out of taxpayers' pockets, and the costs will go higher.
And of course, everybody has not only their one district city council person, there are also 5 at-large city councilmen or people, city council members. So there's no reason why anyone who's interested in getting rid of 2011 400 shouldn't call all 6 of those people.
And call the mayor's office, because if the mayor decides to start all over and negotiate harder and do a more comprehensive and better deal, he needs some backing.
And the city has conveniently given you the number 630-CITY for making those phone calls. Well, then that is it. Here at the Concerned Taxpayers, we have monthly meetings that we invite you all to attend. They're on alternate locations on the west side and east sides of the river. On the second Monday of each month, those are board meetings, but the public is certainly welcome to attend. Our website is being displayed on the screen. We also have an unmanned telephone number, and we welcome you to call us with any concerns you have or any reports of waste, fraud, abuse, nepotism, etc., that you may have come across. Thank you once again. Concerned Taxpayers are here to serve you, and we hope to have more of you trying to help us do that.